Uh, our speaker today is Mr. Russ Adams, the Director, is that correct? Okay, Director of EMS. And Russ is going to tell us a little bit about EMS and even more so the millage that's going to be on August, the August ticket. And stuff like that. And he's also going to answer any questions that we can answer. We're going to ask him a couple first from the Tea Party. So, but with that, let me introduce you to, and please welcome Mr. Russ Adams, please.
I don't know, can you hear me?
I got to have it, Russ.
We're going to go there. Well, then you're going to have to turn me down because I've got that baritone that projects. So it's an honor to come in and talk with you about it. If you've seen any of the media or our news media or Facebook or anything, you understand that there's been a little bit of excitement about our millage over the last month. So this is our second renewal or third overall millage. It last came before the voters in 2020, and at that point it was listed as 0.9 mils. If you're familiar with the Headley Act, there are certain aspects of inflation that constrain it. So we are currently assessing at 0.8814 mils. So we are asking for a renewal of that millage, 0.8814, and an additional 0.3 mils. So it's a renewal millage and an increase. Because sometimes the language is confusing and how that's set up, I do have copies of it, just if anybody wants to see. This is the ballot language that was approved, and this will be a 6-year millage. So interesting thing is that the millage is still active right now. It is going to assess in 2024. This millage comes on your winter tax bill, and it distributes the following year. So this millage, our current 0.8814, is going to assess and be sent to you as homeowners or property owners in December. We're going to receive the funds of that in 2025. This millage election is to begin assessment in the 25 year. First year of distribution will be 2026. The reason for that is in order for it to be a legal renewal, the millage has to still be active, to not be expired or any of those items. So you would be voting on a millage. The years that are listed in the language say for 2025 through 2030. So that's just kind of some background and clarification information about the millage itself. I understand that Tim and the Tea Party want to ask some questions about the organization, about our financial, maybe our budget, things like that, and how or why it is that we're asking for an increase of 0.3 mils. So.
Okay, thank you, Russ. Tea Party just has a couple basic questions that I'm sure you're all thinking of, and then we're going to turn it over to you folks, and Myra's going to come around and let you talk to her. Okay. First thing, Russ, if you don't mind, briefly. Tell us the EMS operation. Can you tell us the number of employees, for an example?
Sure. So we're comprised of both full-time and part-time employees. We have approximately 54 full-time employees currently, and about 34 part-time employees. So that's a total of 80 employees. We also have some part-time employees that through the federal government roll over what they call full-time equivalency. So if any of you own a business, you have to quantify all of the hours that an employee works. So we have 54 full-time employees, but we've got 5 part-time employees that actually qualify for that. So those things become important when we're doing insurances, when we're doing our retirement packages and things. We're actually over 50 employees is called a large employer. To me, that isn't large, but you break a threshold.
Sure.
So,
also, along the same lines, how many ambulances do you have now, Wes?
So units, we have 13 ambulances. We run 7 daily. And some people think that's, well, if you only have 7 stations running daily, why would you need 13? These things are driven hard and put away wet. Oftentimes driven like they're stolen or for an emergency. And the maintenance on them is quite extensive. So in order for us to be prepared to have reserve units and replacement units and other units available. So we run 7 units daily out of 7 different locations about the county, but I do have 13 units, and I also have 1 unit that is not a transporting ambulance, but it's called an ECHO unit, or it is licensed as an advanced care non-transporting unit. So that's a support assistive unit.
Okay, also, tell us about the different stations and their location.
So I'm gonna start a little sooner, and then I'm gonna go to that. In other words, our organization was actually formed in 1997 from 3 existing municipal organizations: North Branch Area Ambulance, Imlay City Public Safety, and Lapeer Area Ambulance. Lapeer Area Ambulance being the oldest, that organization started in 1969. So we have bases in those 3 cities, and those were the foundational cities that formed this. Now in 1969, when Lapeer Area Ambulance was formed, although it says Lapeer in the name, it was actually formed from 9 surrounding communities. Mayfield was one of those founding members in 1969. Metamora, Lapeer Township, a number of those municipal organizations all bought in and formed that. So we have stations and agreements in North Branch, in Imlay City, and the city of Lapeer, the city of Lapeer being our oldest station. Our headquarters, our administrative offices, and our education facility is in Elba Township, right outside the roundabout on Lake Nepsing and Genesee Road. Then we have a station in Metamora, right on 24. You may see that. It used to be a car dealership or something. It's up on top of a hill, right on 24. We've got a station on Dryden Road as you go back east. And we've got a station here in Mayfield, just north of town. So we have a total of 7 stations there. We have a base that we can use in Goodland, but it's not currently a full-time base for us. So we call that a satellite location.
Okay, thank you for that. And then, what is your current operating budget?
It's just over $5 million. In 2024, just over $6 million. Our 2024 budget was $6,076,000. Our budget and our financing is made up, 40% of our budget comes from reimbursements from insurance companies. That's about $2.5 million. 60% of the budget comes from the millage dollars. So that's basically the split. The millage funds are about 60% of our annual budget.
And that's your reason for asking to renew this budget and to increase it?
Well, definitely it's the reason to ask. We can get into the details as why we need an increase as well, which I'm happy to talk about. But yeah, our operating budget this year is just over $6 million, and that's the breakdown of how and where those funds come from. You're already handing the mic off. Is that the rest of your questions?
I'm sure they have questions.
Okay, all right. I wasn't sure if you had any more. Nobody's more important than you.
State your name and John DeAngelis.
Hi, John.
Hi, thanks for coming.
No problem.
I have a question. You know, this lawsuit, what happened with Judge Nolan and awarding fees for a frivolous lawsuit?
So,
what happened with that? Did
I
that
don't
happen
think
yet,
it's
or is that?
Well, I can answer the questions, and I
Okay.
can do my best for it, but I don't think it's
Okay.
as simple as that. Lapeer County EMS was forced to file a lawsuit against the Medical Control Authority. Does anybody in the room know what the Medical Control Authority is?
Could I ask you how you were forced to do that, please?
Sure. We feel that the protocol that requires how we respond to calls is not statutory. In other words, it undermines local authority. So the Medical Control Authority is by government responsible for EMS operations regionally throughout the state. It's divided into counties. Some are multiple counties. Generally, there are multiple hospitals in that county. So a small, not Tuscola, which is on the west. What's the county just north and east?
St. Clair?
No,
St. Clair's east.
That's St. Clair's all the way east. I'm trying to think. Sanilac. So Sanilac County has 3 hospitals in it. You wouldn't think that their population or the geography would allow that, but they have 3 hospitals that manage their MCA. We have 1. And the reason we were forced to is because there's administrative rules. We're able to appeal a ruling. We're able to look at a ruling. So we presented ever since the millage was passed in 2016, to have this protocol looked at. We want it sent to a review board. We want it repealed. It limits our ability to serve the citizens that are paying for this. They refuse to do those things. There's where I say we were forced to legally challenge the MCA and the protocol. So there's where the first thing set up. We did that through our local court, jurisdictional, and those other things. When you get to a point where you're just about to go to trial, you have an opportunity to present something called a summary disposition. So you present a motion that says you're requesting a summary disposition. Our attorneys felt that we were far in the right for any number of things. There were 6 counts that we listed. Their attorneys felt that it was not. Summary disposition was granted by Judge Nolan. The primary reason he granted it was because they didn't have jurisdiction because we didn't exhaust our administrative options. It's a conundrum. If they wouldn't review the protocol, I'm sorry, but you asked a question, so I'm going into details here. We couldn't challenge the protocol through the state processes because they wouldn't touch the protocol. Our administrative options are to challenge through the state. There's a number of committees and boards. All of this stuff is statutory. Judge Nolan ruled that we didn't exhaust those options. So the case was summarily dismissed in that. And then the hospitals, the Medical Control Authority, said that it was a frivolous lawsuit and that it was useless. So there were 6 counts total. 3 of those counts, Judge Nolan has said, yeah, we're going to consider those useless, and you need to pay legal fees to the MCA for those. We are still in the midst of this trial.
Well, I do have it on my phone.
What do you have on your phone?
His judgment, Judge Nolan's.
Okay.
And it showed 6 different things, and all 6 being frivolous, but 3 being so frivolous that he wanted you to pay the other side's attorney fees.
Well,
and since that's millage money, I'm concerned.
It's not necessarily millage money, considering we take 40% of our budget.
It's not your money.
It's not my money, but we raise 40% of our budget. So that's a document, and that's the judge's statement, and I'm thrilled that you have it and you've taken the time to read through it. This case is not done. We have rebutted their claims. They have rebutted our claims. There are stipulated orders that are being challenged. I'm not an attorney. I've spent far too much time looking at statutes and looking at this information. This case is not done. It's not going to trial.
So are you going to appeal it? Are you going to appellate court to go over Nolan's judgment?
So when a judgment comes through or a motion comes through, you have 21 days to file an appeal on that motion. When the case is closed and there's a final order issued, you have 21 days to file an appeal on a final order. We chose not to appeal the judge's motion of summary disposition. That doesn't mean we're not going to appeal the case should it not go our way, such as needing to pay for things that we feel we're justified in. We're not there yet. The case has not been closed. The final proclamation has not been made.
Well, I think the case is closed. It's just a matter of whether you're going to take it to appeals court or not.
No, sir. There's technicalities is what I'm speaking about. There has not been a final order. on the case. The case
Okay,
is not
right.
closed.
I thought that was supposed to come out Friday or something. What
No,
happened
there
to
was
that?
supposed to be a hearing Friday
Okay.
on the information. That hearing was canceled 2 weeks ago by the court. I have no idea how or why.
Okay. All right.
So this, it,
I don't want to take up everybody's time.
The-
I'm going too
thank-
long.
thank you
But
for
thank
that.
you for your answer.
Sure. While we're looking for somebody else, the purpose or reason for pursuing those changes is being able to serve the community. MedStar is a competing ambulance in the county, and they are carved out sections of response area. So we all have to pay the millage, but we can't receive the service from the organization that was voted in to do it. So we've been challenging that distribution of calls. So example would be right here, Mayfield Township, MedStar has a primary response area of about 10% of the county, yet they respond to 40% of the calls, 36%. They have 2 square miles that they're responsive for. They respond to 36% of the calls in Mayfield Township. That's something that when I go to Mayfield Township's board or I speak with them, they're like, why don't we get the service that we voted for and paid for? So we've been pursuing a correction and a change in that protocol ever since this millage was passed. And as a matter of fact, since we're talking about lawsuits, MedStar's the one that sued us on the language. MedStar actually backed that lawsuit and cost the county over $100,000 and us over $100,000 for the initial millage because they didn't want us to have the service that you all voted for. So there have been a couple of lawsuits, they, being MedStar, backed and paid for that first one. Who's got another question?
I guess I'll go. My name's Carl Sickner, and why do we need a publicly funded ambulance service when there are private companies that are in business in the area and willing to make runs, et cetera?
That's a valid question. I am lucky enough to have spent my entire adult life working in public service. I spent 26 years in an Oakland County Fire Department. I've been lucky enough to lead this organization coming up on 7 years. And the difference is the responsibility to the community. It's one thing to have a contracted agent that wants to offer services. It's a completely separate thing to have somebody at the ready waiting to serve you as a public entity. So we look at our public safety, at least in my perspective, as being a primary objective of government. We want to know that police officers are there. We want to know that firefighters are there. Those are deemed essential services because they're at the ready and they're standing by. For some reason, EMS is not considered an essential service. So it's very interesting. But when we go back to 1969, the foundational documents of Lapeer Area Ambulance were that they wanted to have local control over the response to their emergencies. That language was carried through when we formed in 1997 our current structure. There are 13 townships and cities that own Lapeer County EMS. We have always been a municipal organization funded through either general funds or stipends and the addition of any insurance opportunities. One of the things that's come up recently is talking about MedStar's ability, and the only reason I'm saying them, it could be anybody, okay, but they've been brought to me as a challenge, that they use a computer dispatch system, and I identify through geospatial identity where the most likely next run is. So they're going to move vehicles towards the frequency or propensity of runs. So here's the better answer to your question. Our organization, as a commitment to the citizens of Lapeer County, moves them to cover the geography first. There isn't a propensity of calls in North Branch. There isn't a propensity of calls in Rich Township. There isn't a propensity of calls in Columbiaville. Yet we position our vehicles regularly so that we are at the ready. The propensity of calls are in your dense population areas. We have redundant coverage here in the city of Lapeer. But when one of those cars goes out on a run, I don't bring North Branch down to cover the city and abandon North Branch. A municipally supported, tax-based system provides first as their commitment to the community, second to the commitment of the opportunity. And we've seen it actually right here in our county, but nobody wants to talk about it. MedStar was based in Almont Township. They opened that base in 2015, right prior to our election. When we talk about geographic footprints, they were the responsive primary agent for over 80% of that geography. They had 30 square miles, we had 6 square miles. That's the way the dispatch center worked it out. Yet we responded to 50% of the calls because they pulled their car from Almont to cover their responsibility at the hospital. They have a business model to follow. We have a community to serve. So it's a great question. There are organizations that provide similar services, just like there's organizations, we could have private funding man our jails. We could have private organizations do our security at the courthouse. We have sheriff's deputies, we have patrol officers, we have those things. So hopefully that answered a little bit of your question. Our focus is the community and always has been the community.
Hi, Christina Russell, Elba Township. Can you tell us a little bit about your board and the responsibilities of your board?
So like any organization, we've got a set of bylaws. Again, formed in 1997 as a municipal authority under the Urban Cooperation Act. One of the reasons we're a municipal authority, maybe you're aware, maybe you're not aware, municipalities can't spend their tax dollars in somebody else's municipality. Mayfield can't, so they have to contract in a certain way to do those. So we are a municipal authority, and that way our organization, they put funds into it and do that. We're governed by 7 members that are elected annually out of those 13 owners. So the board of directors has, through the bylaws, a chairman, a vice chair, and a treasurer. Those are the positions that are required to provide information annually and run meetings and do those different things. So
Do they help with the budget or anything like that? Spending your money?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there is, so within that, there's 4 other committees, one of which is a finance committee. So as a subcommittee, any expenses over within our finance policy, anything over $3,000 has to have board and budgetary approval. So it has to go through the finance committee first. We've got a finance policy that identifies how those costs are made. We start doing budget workshops in October. We run those things out based on projected earnings as well as projected millage dollars, so they are directly involved and responsible to adopt that budget. The budget is actually adopted by all 13 owners at our annual December meeting. So it's formed and facilitated by the board of directors, voted into effect at the annual meeting.
Okay, so that's all county residents?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And generally elected officials in the owning municipalities.
Okay, so MedStar board, do you have any idea? Or do we have any county residents on their board?
I have no idea what, I know they're owned by 3 hospitals, and I know that McLaren Hospital makes up 30% of their board of directors, but I don't know anything about their organizational operation. I just know about our community and how we interact and serve them. She passed you. You could ask me, but she passed you.
Oh, I'll get next.
Bill Gavette, Attica Township. Is very glad that you came. I got a few things, but my one concern, and I always try to relate it to my things that I know rather
Sure.
than, okay.
Awesome.
I had an issue, and called them, and they came, and it was great, but I was having a heart attack. Now, and I'm sure everybody here, if you don't know, Lapeer Hospital does not have a cath lab. Their standard practice is they will get you there, quote unquote, stabilize you, and move you to McLaren.
Flint.
And so my issue was, I'm self-employed. I get around I know lots and lots of people. I got lots of customers throughout the county. I've had two of them that died, that their husband died on their way to McLaren. So when they came, they said, no, we're going to take you to Lapeer. I said, no, you're not. And kind of a little bit of a disagreement ensued. And I said, basically, all right, well, you guys hit it. I'll go have my neighbor drive me, and if necessary, my wife will have an ambulance meet me down at the county line to get to a hospital that's got a cath lab. Now, if the policy is mandates, and the only reason I had an inverted T wave, and so that was, but I still had a basic sinus rhythm, and I was conscious. If I would not have been, I would have had to go to a substandard hospital without the means to intervene and save my life. I have a real problem with now, they did wind up taking me. I was there. It wasn't busy, so they were nice enough to take me down there, and I was very grateful. But the fact that I had to argue about it is something that, I mean, I've got multiple stints. I've got a history. Unfortunately, I've gotten to know my own body, what happens, and what goes on here. So, what options are there for a person like myself? If this, say this happens tomorrow, is it going to be the same type of thing? Because again, almost keeping your service and EMS out of it. Lapeer Hospital, maybe they can do great for gunshots and car wrecks and everything else, but for my particular issue,
Interventional cardiology.
Right, and also I'm sure you're aware. Maybe it was a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. All the hospitals were rated, and they went through and gave all the hospitals a letter grade. And Lapeer was C or D. It was down there quite low.
So can I take a part of that?
Sure.
And I don't want to interrupt you.
No,
okay. I happened to have asked you a couple of minutes ago how you're doing, and I am so thrilled that you're doing well.
Right.
Your biggest concern is completely out of our control. There's good news, though. So your biggest concern, I just mentioned that there's a medical control authority. The medical control authority is given authority by statute to oversee that system. They make protocols. I don't get to make treatment decisions. I have to work within, and my staff has to work within those protocols. They had a protocol that required us to go to Lapeer or get authorization to leave. That's what you were dealing with. That,
Right.
like, our staff can't supersede that.
Oh yeah, no, I totally understand.
And
that.
so, but here's where the good news is. So we're in the midst of actually a brand new protocol rollout for the state. Within that protocol rollout, there is one because all of the systems have gone toward what's called definitive care. And what that means is we don't want to take away your choice from where you want to go. We want you to be able to choose. And that's statewide. That's more than just us being a service agent. Unless your condition predicates otherwise. So in about 6 months, when these new rules are effective, in your condition, you would not be going to McLaren Lapeer.
Okay.
You would be going straight to the closest interventional cardiology department. So if you're in Attica, it might have been straight down Rochester Road to Crittenton or Troy or one of those. If you're on the east side over here in Elba, you may be going to Genesis or you may be going to McLaren Flint because they have interventional cardiology labs.
Sure.
So there has been a statewide change. We were the last county to hold on to that type of dictate, but that was not through our choice. That was imposed upon us. So there's good news coming.
Right.
And oddly enough, you were educated enough to know what you wanted, and I'm thrilled that you received the service that you needed.
Right, and again, this is not, you know, the staff and everything, they did, I mean, I went through 4 nitros, and they gave me 2 more on the way down. By the time I actually got down to the hospital, the blockage, whatever had broke loose, had cleared, and I walked out of there with 0 damage. I mean, it was,
great.
you know, somebody, you know, upstairs was definitely looking out for me, but no, that was just, that's, you know, and again, that was on a personal thing. So you said in about 6 months, that will change?
So they're going to be implemented within the next 60 days. We're actually going through that process of implementing new protocols. And that is absolutely one that has already been, so they've been earmarked as being adopted. They just need the rollout and the residual training to make them active. But yes, that's a huge change for Lapeer County, and they're following what the state says, and that says the condition predicates destination.
Well, I'm pleased to see that, because I just happened to look up, almost 6% of the population of Lapeer County has heart disease. And I don't know what our number is, you know, if it's 80,000, 90,000, I don't know what the population of the county is, but if you multiply that out, that's a lot of people.
It's a lot of bodies.
And so, and you know, we want to keep living bodies, not other bodies. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep. I feel like this way I'm able to move around. If you don't mind my slouched posture like this once in a while, I'll move around rather than sit down.
Hello, Mike Eckhart from Goodland Township.
Hi, Mike.
I'm wondering how many other counties have this kind of a setup where the county has a majority of the funding for EMS?
A number of them. I don't have an actual tactile number for you. I can tell you that from the publicly funded systems that I know of, all have some type of subsidiary support. So St. Clair County just passed an EMS millage last election cycle, so 2 years ago. That's the first time they've gone with a county-wide millage to support EMS. Genesee County has an EMS millage. Most people don't know that that pays for the sheriffs to be paramedics in the police cars to distribute that care. Livingston County, if you keep on going, has a county-wide millage, and they have general funding support. So as you go about just here, I mentioned Sanilac County, they have an EMS millage that provides support for those things. So I don't have a number across the state, but we know that there are a number of publicly funded systems. When you get into more populated or densely populated areas, we could talk about Macomb County or Oakland County, a number of those use dual trained services with firefighter, paramedics, and fire ambulance systems. So when you talk about municipally funded or municipally supported organizations to provide that care, there are a number of them. We could go to Mecosta County. There's a handful of them that I use as a comparative when we're in negotiations with our union. So,
But how many fund at 60%?
actually, some of them fund more than that.
Do they?
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that you only have 7 daily, I guess I would call it ambulance services
Yep.
in the county for the whole county?
Yep.
And yet there's some cities, I thought Elmont had their own private.
No.
They don't?
No, they don't. They have medical first responders on their fire department.
Right.
Is that what you're referencing?
Right.
Okay, so that's the basic life-saving cares. That's the entry level of EMS.
Right.
So their fire department responds to events with medical first responders. There's 7 communities in our county that have first responder organizations. So there's some of those, but they're non-transporting, they're not basics, meaning even a basic EMT, so they don't have interventional care, they have assistive and supportive care.
Okay. Now, you say you have 7 trucks in the county, but you have 55 full-time employees and I think it was 25 part-time?
Correct.
That's 75 people to support seven trucks? Is that kind of bloated, top-heavy?
No,
No?
not even close. We've been challenged about that. If you talk about top-heavy, if you talk about our administration runs between 10 and 11% of the organizational finances and staffing. When you look at nonprofit organizations, the guideline is 15 to 20%. So we're actually well below that. It takes 2 people to man a truck at any given time, and they're available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So a normal shift for a full-time employee is actually 48 hours. They work 2 24-hour shifts. So for one station, it takes me 6 full-time employees just to cover 6 days. I still have 2 more days to cover through the part-time people. We can get in and break out those hours. No, actually it's not. It's ideal for the operation when you begin to look at the number of hours that individuals work to cover 365 days a year, 24/7.
Okay.
Hey, Russ, thanks for coming.
Hi, Kevin.
I know.
No problem.
I know we've had a lot of chats before, and some of them.
We've had a couple.
Little chatty.
We're gonna keep it light, right?
We'll keep it light,
Okay.
and I do appreciate you coming here and speaking out to everybody here, because, in my opinion, the taxpayers really need to know all the facts. That's my position, is the taxpayers need to know that we have a Lapeer County EMS millage, and they're asking for an increase, that we also have some other issues that are associated with the millage and waiving copays and deductibles.
Okay.
And, that's a lot of money. I mean, last year it was $853,000. I think looking ahead over the 6-year life of this whole millage that's being proposed, it's going to be probably roughly around $6 million. And
Can I pause you there?
Sure.
We've spoken a number of times about this. That's a gross number, and I don't mean yucky. That's a gross billable number. The
Right.
expected receipts or the contractual write-down for self-pay or patient pay is 75% write-down. It's still a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but it's not $800,000 that we're foregoing.
I
It's
understand that,
$200,000.
But it
But
is
so
still-
if we're going to project 200, it's 1.2 million. I want it, like you said, you want the residents to have the full information. That $853,000 of waived copays and deductibles last year alone would equate to about $200,000 in receipts.
Yeah, that may be debatable, but regardless, it's money that's being left on the table that us as citizens and taxpayers are paying the freight on. And I think before we ask for more money, a 33% increase in taxes, that we ought to, take the taxpayers into consideration here when we were saying that, hey, we're going to waive copays and deductibles, whether it's $250,000, $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 over the course of 6 years. That's a lot of money. So that's one thing, and I do believe, and I can say that of people that I've spoke with, a lot of people don't understand that we're doing that. When I talk about taxpayers, it doesn't ever get mentioned in the paper. It never gets mentioned
Actually, it
anywhere
does.
else.
It does all of those things.
And I think I have a fiduciary obligation as a commissioner to let the taxpayers, and I think we all do have, whether it's the Republican Party, the Tea Party, Stand Up Michigan, to let the taxpayers know, hey, these are the facts. That's all I want to do.
So can I touch on that?
Sure.
So we've done this banter, and like I said, I want to be able to keep it light. I want to respect you too, Kevin. So I just mentioned that the millage dollars that all of the taxpayers in this community pay, all of the property owners, are near 60% of our budget. We look at that as paying our staff to be at the ready. That's called the cost of readiness in service. So we feel that you've already paid their salary. You've paid for a service. In return for that service, when you use it, we don't ask you for anything more. We accept whatever your insurance company will pay with regard to that service. So we feel you've already paid for the service.
And I think that's where the disconnect is here, because I think that's really asking for other taxpayers that don't use the service, which are the majority of people in the county, to subsidize other people's health care. So that's the debatable issue that I really I struggle with. As we're being asked to subsidize somebody else's health care by waiving these copays and deductibles and being, you had mentioned earlier that you have a $5 million operating budget, but for 2024, you're looking at a $6 million operating budget.
Yep.
So you're $1 million short. Where's that money going to come from?
No. I said it's a $6 million budget. I
Okay.
misspoke.
Okay.
It's just over $6 million. I'm not $1 million short. We're in the black every year. We're fine that way. It's a $6 million budget. I misspoke. If I need to repeat that,
Yeah.
I misspoke.
You did,
early-
but that's fine, and I'll accept your correction there, and that's fine. Thanks for clearing that up. But, moving forward here, we look at, your strategic planning budget, when we look at this lawsuit, some of the ramifications that may come as a result of this, we don't really know what that number is. I know there's a summary disposition. There's a lot of information that came out, so that Judge Nolan
They
was gonna-
requested $130,000. We rebutted that.
Okay, but if you did have to pay that, and there is anything that else comes up, that $136 take your strategic planning budget from 2024 to 2030 and puts it in the red every year, or real close to the red, bouncing
Actually,
off
it
that
doesn't.
line. You know,
So we talked about this too, and you're looking at a budget for our organization. That's income for that year, expenses for that year. Within our organization, over the last few years, we have what's called a fund balance. That strategic budget that you have has no line item for a fund balance. The reason is, as an enterprise fund at the state, which we're a single fund system, we can only spend what we brought in. So even though I've got money set aside, which at this point we finished 2022 with $1.3 million, our budget, or excuse me, our audit is not done yet. We're going to have finished with a little over $900,000 when we do that. So we have restricted funds, $425,000 for capital expenses and miscellaneous expenses, and we have fund balance, just like the municipalities around here. As a matter of fact, the generally accepted accounting principle says we should have 17%, which is $1.1 million in liquid assets available to our organization. We're just over that.
But that's part of your equipment replacement reserve too, so I know these ambulance units, I think I heard figures up to close to $400,000 to replace an ambulance.
Most I've ever paid is $225,000.
Okay, I stand corrected. That's just information I never really had any clarification of, but that's still a lot of money. So since the inception of the millage there, how many new ambulances has Lapeer County EMS, not including re-chassis?
I haven't done any re-chassis since I've been the director.
And how many brand-new ambulances have been purchased since 2016?
Off of the top of my head, I would have to do a little bit of research. I'm going to say seven or eight.
Yeah, and I know they get used a lot. They probably run up, I don't know what the average mileage is on these things. and
So
how
we
often
run
that-
230,000 miles a year. That's what our organization drives. So when we distribute that across all of our units with a fleet utilization plan, we want to look at average utilization across those, 230,000 divided by this, and we have a 10-year replacement plan that's in process. We look for 230,000 miles. That happens to be a number that we bounced of for our vehicles. So we do have that in plan, and we do have plans for that replacement in writing within our planning. So we're using fleet utilization. I mentioned earlier we have 7 active units a day, but I have 13 units. We want to make sure that the time that they're on the road, that the miles that they're being used are equitable across the line so that we use our vehicles. Again, it's fleet utilization. A truck in North Branch is going to put more miles on it than a truck in Lapeer City. So Lapeer City doesn't have a truck assigned to it. They have the one that we give them and cycle those through.
Yeah, and the last thing I just want to ask you about, Russ, is I know you got 54 full-time, 34 part-time employees, and this has been brought up too as far as the staffing. I know Commissioner Mass brought this up at the Republican Party meeting here a week ago and talked about how, how some other companies will use a computer model to staff their facilities or their satellite facilities based on really what's in demand for that particular time of the day. So like during, the rush hour traffic, in the morning from 6 a.m. to noon, and then maybe from 3 p.m. until 9 p.m. or something, you need to have people available. But do we really need to have a full staffing complement available from like the hours of 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. You know, and that model would vary based on, you know, metrics that have been determined by a computer model, looking at history and all that, and the fact that you could probably reutilize your employees a lot more efficiently and maybe cut down on the number of employees and cut down on the number on the amount of your labor by using a model that might be just to take a look at things based on the need and the particular metrics that are associated with the time of the day and in the history of calls in the past. Have you ever looked at that?
What would really allow me to do that is if we had a protocol that allowed us to do that. In other words, the protocol that I've been fighting since 2017 when I came on board has this little area with a circle around my base and says that's the area that I'm the first call in. I don't have the opportunity to actually make those changes in our organization because of the restrictions of this protocol. I agree with you. There are models with that. The only place I'll disagree with you is that I don't think there were 2 people in your community having a heart attack, or the day that you had the heart attack, it doesn't happen that same time every day, every week, every month. So computer models are great for transit businesses, but they're not when you're waiting for that one of emergency for a community. So our mapping system, again, I cover the geography first, and then I build redundancies for the frequency of calls. Yes, we're going to implement things like that once we get rid of this protocol so that we can manage so that I'm not going like this. Like I said, Mayfield, maybe that's not the perfect location for that vehicle, but if I move it a mile north, I lose a half mile of response area behind it because of this protocol. We're the only community in a state that has a protocol determining the dispatch and response. Public Act 236, the Public Health Act of 1978, gives that authority to local municipalities. You want townships, you want cities, you want local municipalities to make those decisions, not some third-party hospital telling who's going to come to your run. So yeah, there are models out there like that. Yes, staffing can be changed. We can call it day cars or influx cars or rush cars or different things like that. We don't have the ability to manage those things under the current system the way it's designed.
Okay. All right, well, that's all I have for right now. And thanks again, Russ.
No
all
problem.
due respect.
Hi, Russ. I'm Tom Meldrum from Elba Township. I got 3 questions, and more or less the first one is you only collect 40% of the cost of the ambulance from the insurance company?
No. 40% of our annual budget. So 40% of our annual budget comes in through insurance reimbursements.
So it doesn't have to average out to 40% per call?
No, not at all. So there is no system like medical billing. There is nothing like it in the world. You put a price tag on something, and the insurance company says, nah, we're not going to pay that. We're going to write a contractual allowance for that. So each individual form of insurance and each insurer within that form negotiates their own what's called contractual allowance. So our largest insurer in the state of Michigan is Blue Cross Blue Shield. Technically, they pay about 65% of what we bill them. Medicaid pays 50% of what we bill them. Medicare pays about 60% of what we bill them. So those are contractual write-downs. No, 40% of our budget does not equate to 40% of what we bill insurance. So those are not associated numbers that you can make that direct conclusion out of.
Okay, understand. Thank you. And regarding the $4.8 million that is estimated to capture next year, 2025, does that essentially double your current budget?
No.
You said your budget is $6 million, 2.2 came from insurance, so roughly 4 it comes from the millage, the current millage. So
it looks like about just under $900,000 increase from 25 to 26. So the assessment's in 25, distribution is in 26. understanding that we've been operating on a millage that was voted in 2020. Have any of us experienced cost increases in our homes? Maybe gasoline, fuel, maintenance costs, food, health care? We experience all of those same costs. So as those things increase, we've had to look at that. So when we do a study of what it costs us to run an ambulance, in 2020 it was $445,000. In 2023, it was $359,000 in 2020. It was $443,000 in 24. That's a 24% increase, and yet we're held to a 5% increase by Headley and average inflation in both our property values, tax values, property transfers, and all of those other things. So it's $900,000 more in that first year, which will help us buy a couple of more items of new equipment and do those other things and begin to plan for that next cycle. So it is an increase.
Well, I don't understand, why does it say 4.8 million then? What does, I don't understand. Is that what you get next year? An additional 4.8 million and then?
No, so in this year, our millage receipts are $3.3 million. In 2025, they're projected to be $3.6 million. And in 2026, which would be the first distribution of that millage, $4.4 million. Is that what we've got on that?
4.8, yeah.
Excuse me, 4.8. It's going to be less than that. I'm using 4.4. I can explain why. We have to write our millage language today with all of the effective information today. 0.8814 is what our millage assessment is. In 2024, Kevin, you guys just approved the taxable value with the roll down assessment. The actual value of our millage is going to drop, but because it's a renewal, we have to go back to the date that it was originally written. Folks, it sounds like I'm talking gibberish, and I'm not trying to give you a story. I meet with equalization. I meet with attorneys. I meet with all of these people. So equalization is the one that said distribution is going to be $4.8 million. I've budgeted for $4.4 million based on my projections. That first distribution will be almost $900,000 more than the year before. Am I tracking? And again, I'm not, ask me again, or ask me to clarify a point of that. There's a lot of numbers, and I don't want to just shout numbers at you. I was at least prepared to bring some documents that I could reference.
One last thing, can you explain the last line of your language here regarding the Downtown Development Authority? What that is?
I love that. I absolutely love that line. So there are 9 incremental taxing finance authorities in Lapeer County. What an incremental taxing finance authority is, most of us know it as a DDA, a Downtown Development Authority. There are also brownfield developments. There are incremental finance authorities. All of these things, the way they exist, they capture tax dollars. So the city of Lapeer has a downtown development district. They actually have 3 of them. The original district was established in 1986 or 1990. They expanded it east and they expanded it west. So what they do is they capture a percentage of all of the taxes that are collected in that district. So the state law requires that we identify anyone who's going to take those monies. For many, many years in Lapeer County, there was an agreement at the commission and there was an agreement with the communities that no one will capture what's called special voted. So a special voted tax is the veterans tax, the seniors tax, the law enforcement tax, and yes, my tax. The city of Lapeer, in their wisdom, told me to my face, because we can, we should. And they capture, so Your taxes, I'm sorry, was it Elba? I'm so sorry.
Elba, yes.
So your taxes in Elba are not going to the city of Lapeer. They're also not going to the village of Otter Lake. So my legal requirements, I happen to have mentioned we were sued already over millage language. That was the first one. I'm probably an expert, literally, on the values of millage language. I have to be able to provide succinct documentation that that incremental taxing finance authority will not capture, or they have to be placed on that ballot. So the city of Lapeer told me they were going to capture, and the village of Otter Lake chose not to act. They wanted to leave that option. By choosing not to act, I have to identify them. That is completely out of my control. It's a taxing law thing in the state of Michigan, and that's how that goes.
Well, how much percentage are they going to take?
So the city of Lapeer takes, I think, $12,000 total. The village of Otter Lake, I think, is $450 or $600. But I have to include them on that. I would prefer to pay them that money if I could, so that it didn't confuse the language of my ballot. And the phone calls that I get and the information, much like this conversation, thank you for asking that, because it's crazy. It's a district that's identified, they capture the increase in tax dollars for that community, and then they reinvest them in that specific development.
Russ is going to be around here for a while, a few minutes afterwards, will you not, Russ? Okay,
Well, if I get an opportunity to leave, I'm
One more.
yeah.
One more.
Hi, Michael Pizzoli, Goodland Township. The only way to address this protocol and change it was through the courts and attorneys who are going to make a lot of money on it. This, to me, is first responder stuff and should be like air that we breathe. And there weren't, and this isn't directed at you, there weren't adults in the room.
I love that. You can direct it, because apparently there weren't. That's fine.
To say the only way we can address this protocol and fix it for the people of Lapeer County was to take it through the courts.
For 4 years, I presented myself at the medical control authorities, requesting them to address this protocol so that the adults in the room could negotiate it. There's what's called an advisory committee. It's part of the MCA. 4 years, they refused to negotiate it. They refused to address it. So much so that they readopted it in spite of the legal requirement of putting out a 16A notice and a number of other things. They doubled down on it and said, no, I'm sorry. They said, no, forget you. We're doubling down on it. No, there weren't adults in the room. And the thing is that we wanted, should we not be effective in negotiating that? If everybody in the room decided that the existing one was best, that would have afforded us an administrative right to appeal to the state committee. So I happen to have mentioned, as to your question, Bill, there are new protocols coming out. Those new protocols coming out has allowed me to finally do that. So we're going to be in a situation where some of the adults are addressing it, even though it was forced to go through legal advisement.
Sorry, I didn't mean that.
No, I think that's appropriate. You would think that, no,
Good. That was a
I'm
good
good with
question.
that.
Good question. That was a good question.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. With that, we'll wrap up the questions for right now. And again, Russ is going to be around here for a little while afterwards. Let's give him a hand. That's good. Good.